This is a special edition of Meet the Press with Tim Russell.
Our issues this Sunday: Obama wins Iowa.
Thank you, Iowa.
Clinton wins New Hampshire.
Let's give America the kind of comeback that New Hampshire has just given me.
Next stops, Nevada and South Carolina. Our Meet the Candidates 2008 series continues. An exclusive interview with Democrat Hillary Clinton. For 12 years, she was the First Lady of the state of Arkansas. For 8 years, the First Lady of the United States. And in 2000, was elected the United States Senator from New York. This morning, Hillary Clinton joins us for the full hour on Meet the Press.
Senator Clinton, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks, Tim. It's good to be with you.
When we arrived in South Carolina yesterday, this was the state newspaper and the headlines that greeted us, and let me share it with you and our viewers. Clinton camp hits Obama, attacks painful for black voters, many in state offended by criticism of Obama and remarks about Martin Luther King. Bob Herbert in the New York Times columnist weighed in this way. I could also sense how hard the Clinton camp was working to undermine Senator Obama's main theme, that a campaign based on hope and healing could unify rather than further polarize the country. So there was the former president chastising the press for the way it was covering the Obama campaign and saying of Mr. Obama's effort, quote, "The whole thing is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen."
Let me address the point that Bill was making, because again, I think it's been unfairly and inaccurately characterized. What he was talking about was very directly about the story of Senator Obama's campaign being premised on a speech he gave in 2002. And that was to his credit. He gave a speech opposing the war in Iraq. He gave a very impassioned speech against it and consistently said that he was against the war, he would vote against the funding for the war. By 2003, that speech was off his website. By 2004, he was saying that he didn't really disagree with the way George Bush was conducting the war. And by 2005, 6, and 7, he was voting for $300 billion in funding for the war. The story of his campaign is really the story of that speech and his opposition to Iraq. I think it is fair to ask questions about, well, what did you do after the speech was over? And when he became a senator, he didn't go to the floor of the Senate to condemn the war in Iraq for 18 months. He didn't introduce legislation against the war in Iraq. He voted against timelines and deadlines initially. So I think it's important that we get the contrasts and the comparisons out. I think that's fair game. You know, I think that we don't want anyone, any of our supporters, anyone, and that's why in my campaign, anytime anybody has said anything that I thought was out of bounds, they're gone. You know, I've gotten rid of them. I have said that is not appropriate in this campaign. You know, when Senator Obama's chief strategist accuses me of playing a role in Benazir Bhutto's assassination, there's silence. So let's have one standard. This is an exciting and historic campaign. One of us is going to make history, which is thrilling to me. I've worked all my life on behalf of civil rights and women's rights and human rights, and so I want a good, vigorous campaign about the differences between us and our various qualifications and experiences to be the president that America needs.
It just isn't Senator Obama who is taking offense. This is exactly what President Clinton said in Dartmouth. Here's the tape.
Give me a break. This whole thing is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen.
Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina, who's neutral, said this: to call that dream a fairy tale, which Bill Clinton seemed to be doing, could very well be insulting to some of us.
But Tim, let me just stop you right there. You did not. No, wait a minute.
No, I didn't stop you. You had to say, let me just
no, but you did not give the entire quote.
No,
and so the entire quote was clearly about the position on Iraq. It was not about the entire candidacy. It was not about the.
It is wrong that Senator Obama got to go through 15 debates trumpeting his superior judgment and how he had been against the war in every year. You said in 2004 you didn't know how you would have voted on the resolution. You said in 2004 there was no difference between you and George Bush on the war, and you took that speech you're now running on off your website in 2004, and there's no difference in your voting record in Hillary's ever since. Give me a break. This whole thing is the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen.
Let me just stop you right there.
No,
You did not. No, wait a minute.
No,
You did not.
I didn't stop you. You didn't say, let me just
no,
go
but
through.
you did not give the entire quote.
No, but you,
and so the entire quote was clearly about the position on Iraq. It was not about the entire candidacy. It was not about the extraordinary,
Congressman Clyburn has been
abilities.
covering this race. Donna Brazile, herself, a longtime activist in the Democratic Party. This is what she said. Here's Donna Brazile.
As an African American, I find his words and his tone to be very depressing.
So these are people who are not supporters of Obama who are listening. Now, let me just go to the Martin Luther King thing, because you had your opportunity to talk about this at the beginning of the show, and I just want to lay this out for our viewers. This is how the New York Times categorized it. In an interview with Fox News on Monday, Mrs. Clinton tried to make a point about presidential leadership. Dr. King's dream began to be realized when President Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act of '64. Mrs. Clinton said in trying to make the case that her experience should mean more to voters than the uplifting words of Mr. Obama. It took a president to get it done. Again, Congressman Clyburn, we have to be very, very careful about how we speak about that era in American politics. That bothered me a great deal. A writer in the Washington Post today, a black woman, said, it's as if you are minimizing I Have a Dream, that you are saying it's a nice sentiment, but it took a white president to get blacks to the mountaintop.
Well, you know, look, I understand the taking out of context and the mischaracterization. I have spoken with Congressman Clyburn. I have spoken with a number of my very strong and adamant supporters. But, Tim, I can't let you get away with that mischaracterization and those snippets. I was responding to a speech that Senator Obama gave in New Hampshire, where he did compare himself to President Kennedy and to Dr.
Barack Obama, clearly leading in the polls here, again ridiculed Clinton's assertion that he peddles false hopes, saying hope has driven great American accomplishments such as the civil rights movement.
Dr. King standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. You know, this dream thing, it's a false hope. We can't expect equality. False hopes.
Clinton told Fox this in response.
Dr. King's dream began to be realized when President Lyndon Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when he was able to get through Congress something that President Kennedy was hopeful to do, President before had not even tried, but it took a president to get it done.
Today, Senator Obama used President John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to criticize me. And, you know, basically compared himself to two of our greatest heroes, saying, well, they gave great speeches. President Kennedy was in the Congress for 14 years. He was a war hero. He was a man of great accomplishments and readiness to be president. I was responding to a speech that Senator Obama gave in New Hampshire, where he did compare himself to President Kennedy and to Dr. King. You know, President Kennedy served in the Congress for 14 years. He was a war hero. He'd been engaged in many of the battles that led to his election in the 1960 election. Dr. King had been on the front lines. He had been leading a movement. But Dr. King understood, which is why he made it very clear that there had to be a coming to terms of our country politically in order to make the changes that would last for generations beyond the iconic, extraordinary speeches that he gave. That's why he campaigned for Lyndon Johnson in 1964. That's why he was there when those great pieces of legislation were passed. Does he deserve the lion's share of the credit for moving our country and moving our political process? Yes, he does. But he also had partners who were in the political system. And I think it is such an unfair and unwarranted attempt to, misinterpret and mischaracterize what I've said. Look at what I've done my entire life. I have been working on behalf of civil rights, women's rights, human rights for years. And I know how challenging it is to change our political system, and I have the highest regard for those who have put themselves on the line. Congressman Clyburn was part of that movement. So many of the people whom I admire in my country who have given of themselves to make these changes went into politics in order to realize the changes, worked to elect people in order to make the changes. This is, an unfortunate storyline that the Obama campaign has pushed very successfully. They've been putting out talking points, they've been making this, they've been telling people in a very selective way what the facts are. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to set the facts straight.
He doesn't need to play this kind of games. Is
it going to cost him?
Absolutely. I don't think we should be playing the race card at this point.
I don't think we should be playing the race card at any point.